Now, in all of the debt theatrics on Capitol Hill and all of the debt talks, where is the talk of jobs in this? We cannot forget that June jobs report that came out Friday showing unemployment is getting worse. Well, jobs talks are happening now, but you can decide if it sounds like it will help. Meeting today about jobs is the chairman of the President's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness, who is CEO of GE, Jeff Immelt. Now, he's also known for heading GE, that company that famously paid no taxes last year and shed U.S. jobs while adding them overseas under his reign. And it's at the Chamber of Commerce, which is one of the largest business lobbies in Washington, who the Obama administration has also butt heads with in the past. Here to talk about this is labor journalist Mike Elk. Mike, thanks for being here. So you have Immelt, you have the Chamber of Commerce, you have also politicians. What do they want as far as jobs? What is the goal for them when it comes to job creation?
To keep as few workers employed as possible and keep them working as much as possible and for as little as possible. That's their only aims. These people have no real desire for humans. They see human capital as merely another commodity, not something that they really see any social value. So, I mean, they don't have much interest in job creation, but they need one over the long run if they want to sell any of their products. But I think increasingly what you're seeing in the U.S. is that a lot of companies feel that they don't have to invest in America anymore because the global markets are expanding.
Well, yeah, you have middle classes that are burgeoning in Brazil and India that can buy, washing machines or whatever GE products. But come on, this is Immelt. He is the job czar.
Yeah.
Doesn't he want to create jobs?
I mean,
he's got a plan.
I mean, he has a plan, but if you look at his plan for deindustrialization in America, you have to remember his mentor, Jack Welch, is the head of GE, said, I wish you could put factories on a barge so that you could ship them anywhere around the world to wherever labor is cheapest. And, Jeff Immelt has continued in that tradition as the CEO of GE. He shipped 29 jobs overseas, 29 plants since Obama's taken office.
And thousands of jobs.
And thousands of jobs. And on top of that, he just got huge wage cuts to workers at General Electric as part of their union negotiations. So I really don't think Jeff Immelt's a credible person, and I wonder why the president is even working with him.
Well, let's switch gears to talk a little bit about then job creation and industrialization in this country. We have seen a little bit of a rise in auto manufacturing. We've seen a little bit of a rebound. And I'm curious, some of this job creation, some of these plants, for example, you see foreign companies, foreign automakers coming over here. Volkswagen, they opened a plant in Tennessee last month. 2,000 workers were hired. That's an example. Why do you think they opened their plant in Tennessee versus, say, Detroit, where there's a trained workforce for automakers?
Well, part of the reason they did it was the massive amounts of infrastructure investment that they gave there in Tennessee. I mean, massive amounts, including stimulus money that they got to open that plant, which is really ironic since their Senator Bob Corker, who advocated against the stimulus, advocated for the stimulus money for that plant.
All right, but what about right to work?
Some of it is right to work, and it's non-union.
Isn't that why companies would go to a state like that as opposed to somewhere like Detroit?
Yeah, it's non-union, but the interesting thing is that Volkswagen has already signaled its willingness to the United Auto Workers to let a free and fair union election happen there. So there's a lot of interesting talk. Volkswagen is the only foreign automaker in this country that doesn't screen out members that were previously union members. So Volkswagen in Germany has always had a pro-labor rights record. And the last Volkswagen plant that was in America, in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, this was in the 80s, my mother actually worked there, was a union shop. So Volkswagen has always been able to have union shops. So I don't think that's a huge part of the equation.
Yeah, but it's not just Volkswagen. I mean, there are other automakers that have opened plants in right-to-work states. You see them opening in the South. I feel like you see more of a trend there, and there's also evidence that shows that job creation and employment rises more in right-to-work states. So I'm sure you're going to have something to say about that, but I want to bring in what's going on with Boeing. And you see the National Labor Relations Board ruling essentially that Boeing cannot move its production from Washington to South Carolina. Would this set a new precedent?
No, this has been the precedent since the 1930s. I mean, this has been enforced in 4 other cases before.
But you said if this goes through in another interview that it would be groundbreaking.
It would be groundbreaking because it hasn't been enforced much.
So if this is enforced, it would be groundbreaking.
Yeah, and it's never been enforced by a huge name-brand corporation like Boeing. It's been enforced against several other ones, which is that companies cannot retaliate against workers for moving their production to other places because workers went out on strike, which is what happened in the Boeing case. Boeing promised to move production there in 2007, 2008. Workers went out on strike. 2009, Boeing moved production to South Carolina and said in an interview to the Seattle Times that the reason they moved it was because they didn't have to deal with work stoppages.
So if this is enforced and if this is groundbreaking, what would that mean for businesses in the United States? Would this be a hamper to economic growth and job growth?
Well, I think the biggest hamper to economic growth we're having...
But answer my question, not the biggest hamper. I want to know what impact that ruling specifically would have on job growth and business growth in the United States, because why wouldn't Boeing say, okay, we'll forget doing business in the U.S., we'll just go overseas?
Well, first off, Boeing's contractually obligated to make a lot of its parts here, since it gets so many government contracts.
Yeah, but it's not all of its manufacturing isn't required to be here. I mean, if you look at a breakdown, a lot of parts aren't manufactured here.
Yeah, and a lot of it's moving already, but a lot of the manufacturing that's staying here, I think you just can't enforce the Boeing decision. I think what you have to have is a serious industrial policy that keeps these plants from moving overseas. Anybody that does business with the federal government, which is just about every company, those parts should be made in the U.S. Every other nation, Japan, Germany, France, they all have these type of industrial policies. I mean, look at Germany. They're running a trade surplus right now with China. Well, we're running a trade deficit. And German workers make more than American workers make. The average American auto worker makes $36. German auto worker makes $48 in total.
Well, and that's one of the arguments of why foreign companies, along with the U.S. dollar being weaker, why they move production here is because they can have non-union labor, they can have cheaper labor. But my question to you is, with this Boeing ruling and with kind of some of those policies, do they hamper job growth? Is it better to have, less regulation, less union power, more opportunity in right-to-work states because of the situation the economy is in, where jobs are so desperately needed?
I think the answer is an easy one. If you look at the childhood poverty rates of the right-to-work states in the South, they're much higher than anywhere in the United States, so I wouldn't say that's good.
But how can you link poverty with whether it's a right-to-work state or not?
Well, because workers make less than a right-to-work state. They have less money to give their families.
But those foreign plants, according to what I've read, they match their wages to what UAW wages are, and they cited, UAW wages, they've had to negotiate lower wages, such as $14, which is half of what they used to be.
Yeah, well, no, it's a two-tier wage system.
So then wouldn't that just expand to union states as well?
Well, I think what you're looking at there is, so you don't have any of the pension costs that they have. They don't have companies that are built in that way. So you have wages that in some cases match it. But if you look overall, the general trends of right-to-work states, manufacturing, car making is a highly skilled industry. So you have to pay workers a decent wage. But if you look at other areas in the South that have very low union rates, they also have very high poverty rates. And there's a direct correlation. So, looking just at the auto industry, which has to pay workers a certain wage because of skill, is an unfair comparison.
We've got to go, but just really quickly, is having a job in this economy better than having, low wages? Having any job better than having, what am I saying? I'm just saying, is it better to have a job in this situation, even if it's low paying, than having no job?
Well, I think that's, a false choice. I think we can have both good jobs and good wages in this country. Plenty of other industrialized nations do it, so I think any country can do it.
All right, well, we have to leave it at that. Thank you so much. That was labor journalist Mike Elk.